Someday we gonna rise up on that wheel, you know. Someday we gonna dance with those lions. Someday we gonna break free from these chains and keep on flying. Yeah. They telling me it's all good, just wait. No, gonna be there someday. Sipping on Jim Beam, okay. Gotta get these things one day. Till then, do another line, you know. Searching for that other high. Starboard, gotta steal this deal. Kill, I'm gonna be killed. I got a sack in my pocket. Count it, yell and drop it. You know we gonna lose it someday. And we're trying to hold it all together. But the devil is too clever, so I'm gonna die, you gonna die, we gonna die someday, one day. I said, someday we gonna rise up from the wheel. You know, someday we gonna dance with those lions. Someday we gonna break free from these chains and keep on flying.
California has a long and proud tradition of bold thinking, innovation, and progress for social justice. Despite the onslaught of regressive policies in recent decades, demographic changes in our state and a resurgence of progressive organizing has set us poised on the edge of a truly great period of progress. As we gather to embark on our mission to move forward a new era of social change in California, it is fitting that we begin with our inspiring tradition of justice. "100 years ago, Californians of conscience banded together to break the stranglehold of big business on state politics and policies. They adopted direct primaries, ending the process of nominating candidates in smoke-filled rooms and backroom deals. As a result, dozens of new progressive legislators were sent to Sacramento, including the first African American. When progressive-backed Hiram Johnson was elected governor, they launched a wave of revolutionary public policy changes that has come to be known as the Progressive Era. Through over 11 sweeping pieces of legislation and ballot measures over 4 years came the Public Utilities Commission, free textbooks, women's suffrage, minimum wage for women, the 8-hour workday, and the Commission of Immigration and Housing. In 1934, California, like the rest of the nation, was struggling from the devastation of the Great Depression, with 2 million unemployed across the state. Upton Sinclair, author of the meatpacking industry expose novel The Jungle, launched a campaign for governor with the simple slogan, "End Poverty in California," or EPIC. The grassroots EPIC movement swept the state. Hundreds of EPIC clubs were established, with voters flocking to Sinclair's progressive agenda, pensions for the disabled and widowed with dependent children, and a progressive taxation system aimed at eliminating the state deficit and ending hunger in the state. An avowed socialist, Sinclair won the Democratic nomination for governor, much to the chagrin of the Democratic Party, receiving more votes than all of his 7 opponents combined. After a bruising general election campaign where both the Democratic Party establishment as well as the Republicans sought to derail his campaign, Sinclair fell just short, winning 879,000 votes to the 1.1 million votes of his opponent. Years later, Sinclair said of the EPIC campaign, "We gave California and all the other states an exciting awareness of what democracy really is." After nearly 20 years of conservative state leadership, Pat Brown was elected governor of California in 1958. Recognizing the need to build a superior infrastructure to meet the needs of a booming state population, California became the envy of the nation as it built world-class public universities, created the community college systems offering free higher education to anyone who desired it, and made the state's public schools among the best in the nation. The burgeoning population of Latinos and African Americans in the 1960s resulted in struggles and conflict up and down the state. The farm workers' struggle for worker and human rights in the Central Valley, and the Watts riots in Los Angeles.
Well, I think it's important to look at the 50s to the 70s in the development of California. And during that time, there was a convergence of social movements that were important to the changes in California. You have to look at like the Latino movement that was coming out of Los Angeles as well in terms of the anti-war movement and the war at home kind of issues that were being pushed out of that community. The Black Panthers out of Oakland and the work that they were doing in the community and around building a base in the communities around California. I think these were all very, very significant, and they were all happening about the same time. These movements made real change in California, and that real change was a part of what was increasingly threatening to the establishment here. And so I think the 50s to the 70s was significant in terms of shifting kind of where the focus of California was going and what kind of changes were improving the lives of, in particular, people of color.
This social instability resulted in the defeat of Governor Brown and the election of Ronald Reagan with his law and order appeals to the homogeneous good old days before people of color began demanding equality. James Baldwin wrote, "I lived in California when Ronald Reagan was governor, and that was a very ugly time. The time of the Black Panther harassment, the beginning and the end of the Soledad brothers, the persecution and trial of Angela Davis. I saw all that and much more. But what I really found unspeakable about this man was his contempt, his brutal contempt for the poor." Such is the history of California, where changing demographics and the attendant advances toward inclusion and equality have continually been marred by periods of reactionary backlash.
The right-wing backlash uses the element of fear to really kind of build their base and to win these elections. So this kind of thing is really cyclical. How on the one hand, you bring in Chinese laborers into California to work on the railroads and to basically create all the infrastructure to improve the economy of California, but at the same time you create the Chinese Exclusion Act to limit the number of Chinese in California, but also even to limit their powers and their rights. The Japanese Americans come into this country as a part of an intellectual class, that being in the 30s and 40s. And then when World War II comes about, you put them in concentration camps and take away all their land that at the time was worth as much as $400 million.
In the 1990s, California became a majority-minority state. As a result, the decade witnessed a steady string of reactionary ballot measures seeking to punish immigrants, eliminate affirmative action, abandon rehabilitation of criminal offenders, and restrict public education to a narrow Eurocentric curriculum. The backlash has, however, given birth to a steady, slow growth movement at the grassroots level. With every regressive proposition came a counter-movement by grassroots organizations, a contingent of voters, some of the more progressive politicos, and most importantly, students. This is most clearly evidenced by the growth of voter registration in the Latino community post-Proposition 187. After fierce fighting by advocacy groups to defeat the proposition, there was a surge in voter registration by these same organizations, driving up the number of registered Latino voters from a number that hovered around 10 to 11% per year to its new level of 18%. As the color of the state's population has changed, so has the state's commitment to excellent public services and opportunity for all. In addition to the 1990s being a decade of division marked by the exploitation of the fear and anxieties of the Anglo population, the vast majority of Californians suffered from the diminishing investment in our civic institutions. As public support for education, healthcare, and housing has waned, we have witnessed the predictable results of inequality, neglect, and despair. Over the past 3 decades, the gap between the rich and the poor has grown in California faster than the rest of the country, while our middle class has shrunk. California now has the worst poverty rate in the United States at 13.1%. People of color represent a disproportionate number of the poor, making up 55% of the state's population, yet totaling 70% of the poor. 72% of the uninsured are people of color. 30% of all Latinos in California are uninsured. Most must choose between food and health care for their children, and must forego health care altogether for themselves. California's master plan for K-12 and higher education made the state's public education system among the best in the world. Today, California has fallen to the 29th, despite above-average increases in per capita income. Much of this is due to the passage of Proposition 13 in 1978 and the resulting loss of property tax revenue, averaging a loss of $3.3 billion per year from commercial properties alone. The state is going back on its promise for increased access to higher education, turning away thousands of promising students. Today, we find the necessary conditions for another resurgent era of progress and innovation in support of social justice for all. The seeds of demographic change that led to the backlash have now grown roots on which can be built a new majority of voters committed to social justice and equality. California generates more than $1.1 trillion of the world's wealth every year, making it the sixth largest economy on Earth. Yet the state government has consistently failed to design a progressive tax system that will provide the resources to house, educate, and heal all residents. Despite the electoral defeats of the past decade, a significant percentage of voters has consistently stood for inclusion, tolerance, and enlightenment.
No, California really has a progressive majority of people within the population. That if you look at the voting patterns and the demographic breakdown, that we have a majority of people who believe in social justice. They're just not voting in a way that we actually need them to have. And so what PowerPAC is trying to do is to create the infrastructure so that that majority that believes in social justice becomes the majority of the voters at the polls, as we have a social justice electorate within California. We think there is an opportunity both in the primary election in 2006 and in the general election to begin to redefine the debate. There's often this talk about we have to live within our means and we have to make these different cuts and sacrifices, but nobody ever asked that the most affluent or the most powerful Californians are sacrificed. And so we want to begin to both shift the debate by injecting into that debate the issues and the concerns of working Californians, of the Californians who care about social justice.
The road ahead will be neither short nor easy, but it definitely leads to a better future of justice, equality, and opportunity for all members of the California family. With an appreciation of history, we can see that California has had periods of great progress where it modeled for the nation what a truly enlightened, caring, and inclusive society should look like. We are once again poised on the edge of a truly great era of progress toward justice. The future beckons. Together, we can create a society we can be proud of and, in so doing, leave a legacy that future generations will point to with admiration and appreciation.